Welcome to Raising the Bar. I'm your host, Randy Nordstrom, and the show today is welcoming Don Marcari, a very esteemed, I should say famous attorney, an attorney who has offices throughout Virginia and North Carolina. Don, you're a personal injury attorney. You also have a military practice, and we thank you for making yourself available to answer the listeners' questions. Before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your practice.
Well, thanks, Randy. It's good to be here. We have, as you said, offices in Virginia and North Carolina. We do primarily personal injury, but also veterans benefits. We have 10 attorneys, 65 support staff, and we just enjoy what we do every day.
And for people that don't know, you're from originally North Carolina?
Right. I was born and grew up in North Carolina. I was born in New York and grew up in North Carolina. Went to law school and college in North Carolina, then went into the Navy.
And then in the Navy, you had a famous case that became a movie, and we'll get into that a little later. Tell us, what got you into the personal injury line of practice?
Well, I was in the Navy. I did mostly criminal work, and then when I got out of the Navy for about 6 years, I did a general practice. But I was always interested in the civil litigation, suing insurance companies and doctors, and so I kind of gravitated to that and been concentrating that for the last 25 years.
Now, tell me, for people that are injured, right? That's who you help,
right.
Victims who are injured. What does it cost to retain your services? Is it how does that all work? Because a lot of people, I'm sure, need legal counsel, but are a little bit afraid of the costs involved.
Right. Attorneys usually charge by the hour, a flat fee, or like us, a contingency fee basis, which means that they don't have to pay us any money up front, that we end up getting paid at the end of the case based upon a percentage of what we cover for them. So it actually gives us an incentive to get the most that we can for the client, and also gives them access to the courtroom because they don't have to pay us. Attorney fees. Some attorneys now charge $400 and $500 an hour, so it actually gives the average person access to the courtroom and into great legal services.
Okay, which I think is important because a lot of people may not know that they have access to legal services, and a lot of people
sure, and they think they may have to pay us by the hour, and that's it can become cost prohibitive, but they don't pay us until the end of the case, and it's based upon what we recover for them.
Interesting. Okay, now there's also an article that I remember reading talks about attorneys and their impact on the recovery for victims that are involved in an accident. Can you elaborate a little bit on that for us?
Sure. I think the insurance company actually did some studies that show that people that are represented by an attorney get 3 to 4 times more of what the unrepresented person gets. And that's because, we know the rules of the ball game. We know what an injured person is entitled to, such as, their recovery for their medical bills that are incurred, pain and suffering, lost wages, scarring, permanent change of condition. Somebody that's just been in an accident for the first time doesn't really know, what's going on. The insurance company has no incentive to help them out or to guide them.
Do you think it's more of a that you are a better negotiator than the average person because you do it every day, or is it that you literally know what to ask for? What's the biggest?
Well, I think it's probably a combination of both. First of all, it's what I do and have been doing for the last 25 years. So I know what cases are worth based upon my experience. We handle hundreds of cases a month, thousands of cases a year. And plus I think, by just doing it so much, I think you become better at negotiating too. So, if the plumbing goes bad in my house, I call a plumber. If I need electrical work, I call an electrician. If you need, a personal injury lawyer, that's who you should call.
Personal injury lawyer.
Exactly.
Not a plumber.
Not a plumber, not an electrician. Right?
I understand. Okay, so before we get into some questions, I would like the viewers to understand a few different things. One, of course, is tort reform is big right now. It's been big for a while.
True.
Can you help the listeners understand, and viewers, we have listeners and viewers, depending on how you're seeing this, can you help them understand what tort reform is all about and why they should care?
Right. Well, all the big business industries are getting together because they want to limit their exposure. Right. If you go back and look at what the personal injury attorneys have done, we've held them accountable in all different things, asbestos, just all different type of cases. Lead paint for children, just anything you think about that manufacturing does, we've made it safer by holding them accountable. And they don't like that. Okay, it hurts their profits, right? So they were coming out and saying, well, the personal injury lawyers are ruining this country. They're bringing frivolous lawsuits. I've never filed a frivolous lawsuit. I can't afford to. I also, the law firm is a profession, but it's also a business. I have to pay my taxes, pay my people, and so we can't undertake cases that aren't going to be successful. I mean, not all of them are, but most of them are. So we don't file. And I don't know any attorneys that really file frivolous lawsuits. They usually have merit, and there's a lot of safeguards in the justice system that make sure that cases aren't frivolous. So when people talk about tort reform, it sounds kind of interesting and sexy up front, but when you really get into it, it's not fair for the average person that's been injured.
Okay, so when you say frivolous, let's examine that a little bit more. So just because you don't file frivolous lawsuits, are there attorneys that do, and do they clog the court system? And what is in place to stop attorneys from filing frivolous lawsuits?
Sure. Well, there's plenty of safeguards. Defense counsels can file motions for summary judgment. They can demur. A lot of legal things they can do when cases don't have merit. When you file a case, actually the attorneys have to sign those pleadings saying they have merit under the existing law. Okay. There's filing fees. There's expert witness fees that, the costs are ultimately the responsibility of the client, but the attorneys generally front those. Okay. So we're going to invest in that. A medical malpractice case, for instance, you may spend $50,000, $100,000. Okay, so there's a lot of safeguards built into the system. I'm sure there's probably, like any other profession, there's probably some lawyers out there that take advantage, but I don't know many of them. I mean, most of them are good, hardworking people. So I just don't see frivolous lawsuits. I don't see the system's clogged in any way, shape, or form. All right. The biggest thing is probably the lack of funding for enough judges. But it's not because the lawyers filing frivolous lawsuits. Okay. The cases that I said, there again, in 25, 30 years of practice, I've never filed a frivolous lawsuit. Nobody in my firm has. And quite frankly, I don't know anybody else that has.
So you're saying that when you file a lawsuit, it costs you money to file that lawsuit.
Sure.
And I think that the sentiment of the people that believe in frivolous lawsuits, or not believe in them, but believe that that's part of the problem, it's that companies are paying for things that they shouldn't have to just because it's easier than defending a lawsuit. Does that make any sense to you? I mean,
insurance company's not going to pay my client money unless there's merit in that case. Okay, they're just not. I mean, they're not in the position of just giving away money for anything. They're in the business to make a profit also.
Sure.
All right, so they try to minimize those claims. So I mean, just because I file a lawsuit doesn't mean the insurance company's going to pay. Then I have to take that case to court, and I don't know many attorneys that can convince a jury of 7 or 12 people that a claim is meritorious if it's not. The average person is pretty smart.
Right.
I may be a pretty good attorney, but I'm not going to convince them of something that's not true.
Makes sense. And so the idea is that, in fact, I read an article to highlight the point that certain insurance companies just decided that in order to save money, they were going to deny every claim on its face and make the attorneys go to court, or at least threaten to make the attorneys go to court, because they thought that if they fought every single one, some attorneys would just give up.
Right, and you see that happening. You see a lot of insurance companies not wanting to pay a fair amount, which forces us to go to court. And and there are some firms that aren't willing to do that. Ours will. I mean, we probably at any one time we have over 150 cases in litigation. So 85% of the cases settled, but you still have to take every case with the idea that it may go to court one day, because that's the only way you can hold the insurance company accountable.
Does the insurance company ever say that they are going to pay a fair amount, and then as soon as an attorney is involved, they then put on the brakes and say, no, we're no longer? I mean, I think that's what people are afraid of, that they would get treated fairly. Once they call the attorney, then the insurance company becomes the combatant or the enemy.
Well, I think it's the other way around. I think they want to pay something that's not fair, until an attorney gets involved, because then they know I'm protecting my client's interests. I can tell the adjuster, look, you've offered this, but what about the pain and suffering? What about the future medical bills? What about the scarring? What about the lost wages? Okay, some things that the average person who gets in an accident doesn't think about, doesn't even know to claim.
So then you're telling me that there's not a case that you've had where an insurance company has made an offer to a person before they engaged your services, and then you ended up getting them less money than that?
I don't think that's ever happened. Okay, I can't imagine that happening. And why would I have a client come to me and be penalized by hiring me? Okay, that's just
sure.
We make it a policy in our firm never take more than the client. We want the client to be treated fairly, whether it's by the insurance company or by us.
Right, and of course, you and I both know that from being in this world. But I think that the average person, that must be a fear. It must be that, listen, the insurance company is offering me enough to get halfway to work and is offering me enough to get some Band-Aids and a little bit of
We have
whatever.
clients call and say, "Oh, well, the adjuster said, well, why do you want to give an attorney a third of your money?" They say some things that try to discourage
Sure.
people from getting us because they know, as their own studies have shown, that somebody represented by a qualified attorney gets more money, and that's the only thing I can get for them. In the civil cases, we can't give them back their health. We can't take away that inconvenience of having a good car. Now they don't have any car, or they got to have a car payment. For being in pain, not being able to sleep, taking medication. All these things.
Yeah, I think I speak for most of my listeners when I say that money is okay to be given.
Sure.
If that's, justice really comes from either giving me back what I lost, so you can't undo an accident.
Right.
You can't undo the damage or the hurt. But you sure can compensate people.
Yeah, and people just want to be treated fairly. That's all you
Sure.
want. You want to be treated fairly.
And just because a person is smiling doesn't mean that they're treating you fairly, right? That's
Exactly right.
Don, let's go right to some questions from some listeners. First question is from Sandra, Elizabeth City. And Sandra wants to know, should I speak with the insurance adjuster?
Well, I think you got to be careful because remember, the insurance adjuster works for the insurance company, right? And they're not always on your side. So there's a lot of things you may say that can hurt your case. When you're first in an accident, you may be under shock still, you may be on medication, you may not be sure of what exactly happened. So you have to be careful of what you say to the adjuster because they can use that statement against you later on.
Very good. Okay, our next question comes from Roger from Ohaski. Our next question is Roger Ohaski. And Roger would like to know, do I really need an attorney?
Well, I think you do.
Roger, yes. The answer is yes.
The short answer is yes.
Sure.
The longer answer is yeah. The insurance company
Absolutely
studies.
yes.
Yeah, absolutely. God bless it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I would tell Roger you definitely need an attorney. Somebody that's qualified and experienced in personal injury work, because there's a lot of things Roger doesn't know about his case. How to prove his case, how to document his case. What areas of damages that he may be entitled to be compensated for, such as medical bills, pain and suffering, lost wages, lost earning capacity, scarring, permanent change of conditions. So, he needs to talk to somebody that knows what's going on.
That makes sense, Roger. Hopefully you're listening, but yes, a lot of things.
Get back
it sounds
on the phone,
like
Roger.
Yeah, you need help there. Okay. Next question is going to be from Cindy from Virginia Beach, and she would like to know, what can I do about my property damage claim? Or I guess, how does she handle a property damage claim?
Well,
she calls an attorney.
Right. There's two different aspects of your case: the property damage and the personal injury. The property damage is probably the easiest part, okay, because there's only a certain amount of things the insurance company is required to do. Either they're going to fix the car or they're going to total it, whatever's best for them, whatever's cheapest for them, right? And so the problem is a lot of people have a good car, they've maintained it well, there's no car payment, but the Edmunds or the Blue Book, they're going to pay the fair market value, which may not be a lot. And so people then left with, having to get a new vehicle with a car payment. So it's a difficult position to be in. I always tell my clients, look, you lose in the property damage, you try to make it up in the personal injury, kind of facetiously, but there's a lot more things I can do for you, a lot more things you're entitled to be compensated for with the personal injury aspect of your case.
No, that makes sense. Let me ask you this. If your car, if they're going to total your car, is there a way to fight to get it not totaled? Is there any reason to do that? And
well, you may tell the insurance company, look, I want to keep the car. You may have somebody in the family that can fix it, or as a body shop person, you may think you can do something for it. And so, certainly you can say, look, just pay me, the salvage value for it, and I'll keep the car. But generally, what you try to do is I tell a person, if I think it's going to be totaled, look, start looking around, go to dealerships, call CarMax, whatever, find out what that vehicle's worth, and we'll try to keep you in the rental car as long as we can. But they're going to pay off that vehicle as quickly as they can, so you need to be starting thinking about, something else to drive. I even tell them, look, where was that car financed? Maybe we can go to that dealership and say, look, let's roll a new loan into this. That way they don't come up with a down payment. So there are some creative things we can do, but it's a difficult position for a lot of people to be in.
Sure. The other side of that coin, of course, would be if they're not totaling the car and you don't want it back. Let's suppose it, because cars are not worth the same amount of money when they get hit, right?
If it's frame damage or something, you have to document that in your title sometimes. So,
right.
A lot of times I tell the person, look, that car's not going to be the same. You may want to think about selling it. But, they're going to do it there again. They're only required to do what's cheapest for them, if they fix it or repair it.
And is that something that as a lawyer you can help people if they're
Certainly, we try to help them out. We have people that work for the insurance company. We have 4 negotiators on staff, all former adjusters with the major insurance companies, have over 15 years experience each, so we can guide them through that, help them whatever we need to do.
Okay, great. Next question comes from Rita from Raleigh. Rita would like to know, how can I be compensated? Rita wants to know, how can I be compensated for the time I miss from work?
Well, certainly that's an aspect of damages that somebody's entitled to be compensated for. It's easy if Rita works, an hourly job, makes $10 an hour, 40 hours a week, $400. That's easy to do. The difficult part comes when somebody's self-employed. Because any self-employed person knows this month they may make a lot of money, next month they may not make so much. Okay, so what happens in that case is I take the person's tax returns, I look through their Schedule C, I look through any contracts they have, and I try to generate a fair lost wage claim, based upon their prior history, and I advocate that to the adjuster.
So a person is really entitled to a lot of things.
Sure.
A person when they're injured. Can you give me sum it up for me? Like what are things that people are entitled to, and what are things that they're not?
Right. Well, what I'll do is I take every case and I think about what would happen if that case went to court. Then I would look at the jury instruction that the judge is going to give the jury, and that is a person's entitled to be compensated for medical bills that are reasonably and necessarily incurred. For pain and suffering, that's subjective. Is it worth $1 a day or $10 a day? Then we try to show people that, or bring to court people that knew that person, to testify what they could do before the accident, after the accident. For lost wages, for lost earning capacity. Maybe you were making $50,000 a year, and now you can't do that same job. You're making $25,000 a year, and I extrapolate that over their life history. For any scarring, we should take pictures of that. So that's worth something. It's not. It's hard to quantify, but certainly it's an aspect of damages that's important to that person who has that scar. For any permanent change of condition, maybe they have a disability rating now. Maybe they were very active before. Maybe they were a runner. Now they can't run. So, and the problem is there's no book to go by, right. To guide somebody by. So you have to kind of put all those together and come up with what you think is a fair amount, and demand that from the insurance company and be able to support that demand to either the insurance company or jury.
Okay, so bottom line is it's a case-by-case basis.
Sure, every case, it stands on its own.
And it's relative. It seems I never thought about that before, but if somebody what if they weren't working where they're impacted with their injury, but what if their personal life, let's suppose they used to climb rocks, they used to be, a basketball player, I don't know, something.
Right. Maybe they like to play the piano. Maybe
sure.
They got a,
is that something that people can be compensated for if their hobbies or their passions
Sure,
are
we
affected?
try to advocate, definitely. We try to learn about that person and then advocate their position to the insurance company, because the insurance company doesn't know them.
Right.
To them, they're just another number, okay? That's our advantage. We get to know that person as a human being.
Here's something I think is interesting. Most people, when they're involved in an accident that isn't their fault, they think their insurance company is the place where they pay their premiums to, so they don't want to really, get the insurance company mad at them for fear that premiums may go up. But what most people, I think, don't realize is it's the other person's insurance company that's having to pay for the damages, right?
Well, normally, that's, if that person has sufficient coverage, which you hope they do, but
Sure.
There's a lot of people driving down those roads that don't have any insurance, or they're underinsured, very minimum amount of coverage, okay? And that's when the person's own insurance policy can come into play. So that's what we look at every source of coverage when the client comes in. We look primarily at the defendants, but then the person's own policy. There may be things called medical payments coverage. There may be underinsured or underinsured coverage. And if we use those and have to use those, that's a non-liability situation to the client. Because I tell them, look, I don't want to hurt you, do anything to harm you. I'm here to help you. So I don't want your rates to go up. And you can use those two coverages, and the rates will not go up. All right. Then we look at health care, and then a lot of people now have health insurance policies that are entitled to have subrogation rights. Okay, so I negotiate with them. So now I'm negotiating with, the primary defendant's insurance carrier. I may be negotiating with the doctor bills. I may be negotiating with, health insurance companies. So now the practice of personal injury has become a lot more complex.
So you're saying uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage and medical payments or med pay. Those are two things that you can file for that do not affect your premium. So even with your own
And
insurance.
I think everybody should go home right now and look at their policies and see if they have it. Because, insurance is a necessary evil. You don't want to pay for it. Times are tight economically. You don't want to spend that much money for your insurance policy. And your agent, who may be, well-intentioned, says, okay, well, you don't need this, you don't need that. And you don't until you get into an accident. Okay,
Right.
but look at your policies. Okay, make sure you have medical payments coverage. At least have $1,000. Okay, make sure you have uninsured and underinsured coverage. I recommend at least $100,000 because if you get into an accident nowadays, it doesn't take long before your medical bills really mount.
Right. Yeah, with rising costs of medical expenses.
Sure, an MRI,
more insurance.
$1,500. It's expensive.
Okay. What do you say to people who need medical treatment after an accident, but they don't have medical insurance? I know it's a little bit of a
right. It's tough because the doctors are running a business too, and they want to be paid. So if somebody doesn't have medical insurance, we'll maybe try to suggest some doctors that don't want to be paid that will hold their bill, or we'll write to the doctors or call the doctor's office and say, look, they've got a case going on right now. We'll sign an assignment of benefits or whatever to make sure you get paid at the end of the case, but that person needs treatment. So the biggest thing is you've been in an accident, get the care that you need.
All right. So bottom line, accident, the most important thing is get better.
Take care of yourself, right?
Okay, great. All right, let's get another question. This one comes from Carlos. He's in Charlotte, and he wants to know how much his case is worth. Well, I guess that's like how long a piece of string is.
Right. Well, I don't have and I tell clients, look, I don't have a crystal ball. That's the question most people want to know.
I have
what's
a
my
spare
case
one
worth?
If you want to borrow it.
If I could have that,
Doesn't work.
that's worth a lot of money.
Yeah,
there,
it doesn't work.
But you don't know what a case is. You don't have a crystal ball. There's no book to go by. Okay, so you just have to take your experience, and then you have to make sure that you quantify, all the damages. I had a case yesterday. I was talking to a client. Unfortunately, she bought a brand new Jeep. It rolled over. She got hit, got a broken nose. But she's working, for her husband's company. Doesn't have time to go to the doctor. And she said, well, the insurance company, that ought to be self-evident to them. I said, some things are self-evident, but they work upon documentation. Okay, so they're going to say to me, hey, Don, she has a broken nose, but she didn't get any further care. How bad could it have been? Right. So I'm not telling people to go to the doctor unnecessarily, but they got to get the treatment they need because it helps them, number one, and it helps their case, number two.
Makes sense. I know one thing that's self-evident. All men are created equal. Thank you very much.
There you go.
All right. Our next question comes from, we got Keisha. Keisha, it's Norfolk. Oh, it's another. It's Keisha from Virginia Beach. And she wants to know, should I use my health insurance? We sort of touched on this a little bit, to cover my medical expenses after an accident.
Sure. If somebody has health insurance, use it. That's what you have. You're paying for that every month. Use your health insurance because at the end of the case, you have to pay any outstanding medical bills. All right. So if your health insurance is paid for those, that's just more money in your pocket. So if you have that coverage you've been paying for and you're entitled to use it, definitely use it.
Great. Okay. Hopefully that answers that question. Let's go to Allison in Chesapeake. And Allison would like to know, what are attorney's fees? How much does it cost? How much do I have to pay? And what do I have to give you up front?
Well, the good thing is you don't have to pay us anything up front because we work on a contingency fee basis. So that's a percentage of what we get for you ultimately at the end of the case. Most personal injury attorneys charge a third. All right, we have a policy at our firm, never take more than the client. So if we have to reduce our fees for some reason, it's been a tough case, whatever, there's been issues, we'll reduce our fee. But the good thing is they can, have access to our law firm, no money out of pocket.
Okay, great. So for people out there that are concerned about that, they can call you, use your services, you'll get to work right away. And then what? At the end of the case, when they get their settlement or their verdict or their payment, that's when you get paid?
That's when we get paid. And then we have a settlement sheet. We go over that with the client. We tell them where all the money goes so they can see that.
Sure.
We document it. They sign it, and they agree to it. So everything's above board.
Are they sort of kept in that loop the entire time, or is it just at the end?
We try to keep it. Oh, definitely we get settlement offers or whatever. We keep them informed. Every important aspect of the case, they're involved in. The first case is the first part of the case. They get their medical care. Once we get that, we get all documentation, do a demand, we'll negotiate, we'll tell them where we are, then we decide if we're going to trial or not.
Great. Okay. There was a movie that was inspired by a case of yours, a movie starring Tom Cruise called A Few Good Men. And I love the movie. I mean, I've watched it a lot.
It's a good movie.
It's a good movie. Tell us a little bit about how that all happened and what kind of impact that's had on your life and your career.
Well, after law school, I went into the JAG Corps with the Navy. I was stationed shortly thereafter at Naval Air Station Oceana. and we had a call. This is back in 1986. That there were 10 Marines in the brig in Guantanamo Bay. They were all charged with attempted murder, and in real life, the guy didn't die.
Okay. In the movie, though, the actually
movie
right.
died,
okay.
yeah. And they made confessions, and we were supposed to go down there and plead them out. The colonel was willing to make a deal because they were all good Marines.
Sure.
And there was only one defense counsel down in Gitmo, so they had to fly 9 of us from all over the country down there to represent the kids. And none of us had tried a case before. So I was stationed at the Mac, close to the Mac terminal in Norfolk, and was the first one to fly down there.
And is the movie, for people that have seen it, how similar is it to other than, of course, the guy in the movie died and he didn't die in real life?
It was no Demi Moore, so but it was probably, it was probably 50% true. I mean, the colonel played by Jack Nicholson was probably the most realistic character. 7 of the kids took the administrative discharge that the colonel offered and went home, and my client and 2 other ones we ended up going to court. My client was found guilty of simple assault, ended up staying in the Marine Corps. Matter of fact, unlike the movie.
So you wanted the truth.
Yeah, I did.
As it turns out, you could handle it, right?
But I got the truth.
Yeah, and you were able to handle the truth. That's very good. But that's not the only case you've had that's made some national headlines. I also know that you've been on a few talk shows, including Montel Williams.
Mm-hmm.
I know that according to my notes, my researchers do a pretty good job. You were interviewed by E! Entertainment Television, been on a few different national news broadcasts. Do big cases sort of find you, or is it just one of those things?
I don't know. I've been fortunate to represent some pretty good people that have been in some bad circumstances.
Sure,
so,
maybe the fact that you do a pretty good job probably helps.
Well, we do our best. I mean, and I think that's one thing that I learned from the case that became the movie For a Few Good Men. That when you undertake representation of a client, no matter what the odds, sometimes that's you're your client's only friend, and you got to be willing to go, the whole way with them.
Sure. Tell us about your experience in the Navy, other than, of course, the famous movie. Mm-hmm. You were in the Navy.
Right, I was on the
Thank
mobile.
you for your service, by the way.
You're welcome.
Tell us a little bit about your...
Almost 4 years. I was on the mobile trial team in the Navy. I was a defense counsel for half that time and a prosecutor for half the time. But we would fly out to all the aircraft carriers, try cases, on board ship till midnight, 7 days a week. It was a great experience, got great trial experience. At that time, there was... I guess 22 defense counsel at the NILSO. Every kind of major crime you could think of, we were dealing with.
And you have you met one of your partners, I guess, in the Navy.
Dave Russotto, right? Dave was one of the lawyers I trained before I got out as a prosecutor. Good guy. We stayed in touch. Just a hard-working, honest guy. And I knew one day that if I ever started a firm, I'd want him to be a partner. And
you guys together have a VA practice?
Right, yeah.
Yes?
Dave heads up the veterans practice. We have 13 people doing it for 4 years now. We've represented thousands of veterans all across the country.
Talk to us about the soldiers are having a hard time coming back.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. They're coming back from war with all these tragic injuries, both physically and emotionally, PTSD. Mm-hmm. Back when my dad was in World War II, we probably didn't understand how debilitating, post-traumatic stress disorder was. So Dave and his staff are doing a good job. The VA, unfortunately, is so understaffed. Our military members are waiting, months to get treatment. Once we get them their compensation, they're waiting months or years to get paid. Hopefully there'll be, the president the other night spoke about our VA system. Hopefully it'll be overhauled and the vets can get the attention that they deserve.
Is it a general apathy with the administration, or do you think
I think it's just not so much apathy; it's just overworked. They got a lot to do. Some good intentioned people there,
right? But
the system is just backlogged terribly.
So it's just a matter of we need more resources, we need more people.
Definitely, and with our budget's $18 trillion, where the resources coming from?
Sure. Okay. So all listeners out there, if you're not in Virginia or North Carolina, but you have a VA issue or you have questions, they can still reach out to you.
Sure. Yes, we handle cases all over the country for veterans.
Okay. What about family members of veterans? Let's say there's some.
Yeah, they're entitled to compensation also. So give us a call. Dave and his staff will be glad to talk to you.
Okay. And I think for listeners who are looking to reach out, I think the website, you've got a website. It's donmarcari.com.
Right.
DonMarcari.com.
Correct.
And telephone number 888-CALL-DON.
That's it. Makes it easy.
And my producer just told me that you have a case where you have a client who was hit by a wall. was that at an intersection, or can you help us understand?
Well, right now we're in the middle of it's an interesting case. It's a person that got injured when the wall of his apartment complex got blown over onto him, and the backstory is one of the employees there at the apartment complex, his son came to live with him, had some personal issues, decided he was going to take his own life. He went down to a maintenance room, turned on some gas, thinking he was just going to asphyxiate himself. A hot water heater, the pilot light turned on. He ended up actually having a big explosion. Unfortunately, he didn't get hurt. It blew him out of the room, but the wall ended up falling on our client. So, we're pursuing the apartment complex right now. We'll have to see how that case ends up. But we've fortunately been involved in some pretty interesting some cases throughout the years.
Sure. And on that note, let's talk about some of the more interesting cases that you've been a part of or aware of. Mm-hmm. Anything come to mind in terms of just really out there, something that just crazy case, interesting case, not just the big newsworthy cases?
Well, they're all interesting. The challenging ones are the trucking cases. You imagine a big 18-wheeler going down the road can cause some serious damage.
Sure.
Some brain injury cases. Those are always challenging. You're dealing with, a bunch of different experts, life care planners, neuropsychs, neurologists, economists, so those are all, we've been involved in and represent some great people.
Sure.
Who have been involved in some unfortunate situations. And, I remember there was unfortunately a case where this young lady, 19 years old, was going down the interstate to her mother's birthday party. Tractor trailer was going the other way. The trailer got loose, came across, hit her. She was brain damaged she was fine from her neck down, but had a serious brain injury. Her husband was a great guy, was a military member. He left the military to take care of her. We were able to do some things creatively to get her a house, a van, and now he's taking care of her. So just some tragic cases, but you see how the human spirit rises and when tragic things happen. So we've had some great clients.
Nice, and I'm sure that speaks well to you as an attorney, right? I think great clients.
It's easy when you have good clients.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that seems fair. All right. So then, let me ask you this. I remember reading a story about a capital murder case that you had. Mm-hmm. With a little bit of mistaken identity, or
it was it was interesting because the client actually came to me for her psychic, said that she was referred to me. So when the psychic refers your case, you got to take it, right? But
sure.
This was
you learned that in law school, right?
I did, yes, right. And a young sailor was this girl had called him on the phone. It was a mistaken phone call. They ended up talking and having this torrid love affair for 3 or 4 months, and she sent him all these pictures and said she was something that she wasn't. He fell in love, and then she said she had been raped, and which was not true.
So wait, they had a love affair for 3 months, but
never
they
met.
hadn't met.
They had never met.
Okay.
Never met. Always, this was through texting and the computer and the internet, and he ended up killing somebody because of things she said, and then we ended up finding out that it wasn't true, and he ended up putting the girl on the stand. And the military, for the first time since President Kennedy, I think, was seeking the death penalty.
Wow.
And he ended up serving life imprisonment, but we ended up saving his life. But it was a pretty fascinating case. Yeah,
that was a story I remember made national headlines. Not the actual case or but the circumstances surrounding what he was charged with. Mm-hmm. I remember that, and I thought it was interesting because it was early on in the catfish.
Right, exactly. That was exactly what it was. Right.
Right. So it was mistaken identity. A person thought it was somebody else. Now, what was there? Do you have any insight as to what this girl was? What was she getting out of it?
Apparently she, I put her on the stand and had her on the stand for a day, and apparently she had such a bad self-image that she would call up these sailors, just random numbers, and start these conversations with them, and then send them pictures of these beautiful girls. She said she was rich, just spun this big story, and then when the sailors tried to get close to her, she would cut it off. And this was something she was doing on a continuous basis. The amount of the phone calls, I think, and text messages were in a 3-month period, sometimes, 40, 50, 60 a day.
Now, is there any logic to that her actions set into motion?
Well, I think they did. I think that's what the jury found. That's why I don't think they gave him the death penalty, because they found that, she was the motivating factor, even though, like she said, she didn't tell anybody, kill anybody. So, and the sad thing is she wasn't even charged with anything.
And that's and who was the one that was the psychic contact you?
No, the mother of my client.
So okay, so then
Came to me. Yeah, that's how I got to represent him.
that's interesting. Okay, well, let's on that note take a couple more questions. I think I was handed a few that came in, so let me grab these. Our next question from Rochelle. Rochelle from Greensboro would like to know, can your law firm represent me if I've already spoken with the adjuster and signed paperwork?
Well, it depends on what paperwork she signed. If she signed a release, unfortunately, she's going to be out of luck. And that's why, the insurance companies nowadays, have an internal policy that they need to be out to the client, the injured person, within 24 or 48 hours. And they have a release with them. And sometimes it's called a schedule release where it says, we'll pay up to X amount of dollars your medical bills. Well, if you read the fine print, it's the medical bills they consider that are reasonable and necessary. Okay, so if that person, signs that release, unfortunately, that case is over with. So they got to be careful about what they sign. So if they've just talked to an adjuster, fine. We'll be glad to, represent them. But
Sure.
If they've signed something, and there's a lot of circumstances that we've been able to get that release thrown out. Maybe the person didn't understand. Maybe was on medication at the time. But it certainly is a big hurdle to overcome.
Right, medicated, maybe not from the accident, but maybe prior to the accident.
Well, maybe when they sign that release, they're on medication. They've got to have the ability to contract, and so that's
Sure.
what we try to look at. Did they have that ability to contract?
Do you have an example of someone who signed away the rights? Let's say they signed and then turns out.
This year I had a case where a client came in and signed a release. 2 days after the accident, just thought they had neck pain. And I think it was $2,000 or something they signed and got. They end up going to an orthopedic surgeon, a couple weeks later because it's hard to get into the doctor. End up having a herniated disc and now they need surgery, and that case has already been settled.
So now what does that person do? Are they just
They're out of luck, right?
Okay, good reason to contact an attorney. Okay, so my producer is giving me the wrap up, so we're almost out of time. I'd like to thank my guest Don Marcari for joining us today and in the studio on Raising the Bar. And if you have any questions that you have not had answered, or you'd like to contact Don for any reason, website again is donmarcari.com, DonMarcari.com, or contact him by telephone 888-CALL-DON, correct?
Simple enough.
Simple enough. Okay, thank you again, and thank you to all of my listeners. We hope you join us again on Raising the Bar. Until next time, please remember, stay safe, protect your rights, and look for us online at weareraisingthebar.com.